enjoy your minute.
I really need this job. You're a deportee, aren't you? You can't hire a criminal.
I'm looking for Samuel St. Clair.
I've been looking for my son everywhere.
You got a beautiful smile.
You love me, right?
There are other ways to pay for things.
Make an example out of it.
I'm done.
You don't know.
Deported boy!
I'm in trouble. Why you do this for?
There's only one law here in Greenwich Park.
Fight. Won't be killed.
Thanks. That film is home again, and that started the process to make this film. Started about 8 years ago. I was reading an article, a newspaper article, about a friend, a childhood friend of Jennifer Holness, who is my co-writer, and also she's the producer of the film. Full disclosure, she is my wife and the mother of our 3 children, our 3 rambunctious daughters. The article was about a school friend of hers, and she'd known him from when they were kids. He'd come to Canada from Jamaica at the age of 6. He was quite young when he came, just like Jen. And then fast forward to teenage years, and he got mixed up with the law, unlike Jen. But the thing is that after he got mixed up with the law, he was deported and then sent back to Jamaica. The article we're reading was his obituary. He was killed. He was killed in Jamaica just as he was turning his life around. But the question, it stunned us and it shocked us, because the question that we were left with was, is deportation a death sentence? And then the other question was, well, what would home mean to a deportee? And so that led us on the journey of Home Again. And that's the film that's currently playing in theaters nationwide. We went down to Jamaica and thought we were going to go down to Jamaica and interview deportees, because the thing was, how can we understand what life was like for them? So we went down, took the family down there, and interviewed over 40 deportees. And how we found them was through the rehabilitation programs. These are rehabilitation programs largely through church organizations. At the time, there was no government resettlement programs at all. What happens after you're a deportee is you come to the airport, maybe you get fingerprinted, and then if no family comes to pick you up, you're on your way. You're on your own. And in the case of Jamaica, you got to basically walk about an hour to get from downtown Kingston, from the airport to downtown Kingston. And then I guess you're supposed to find your family. Now, we use the Jamaican example because that's our background, but this is happening all over the world. The immigration holding or immigration jails all over the world are filled with people descending from the United Nations, basically. What's happening with Western democracies is we're stepping up deportations. And again, this is due to 9/11, war on drugs, war on crime, whatever war we're facing right now. The media tell us whatever happens is we are actually stepping up our deportations. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. I was born here in Canada, and my parents came here from Jamaica in the late 60s. I always wondered how they would make their minds up to come to Canada coming from such a hot country. And so I thought, okay, well, I wonder how the conversation went. So I thought I went a little something like this. Julie, let's go somewhere where we don't know anywhere. It's cold, and I no friends, no family, no nothing, and let's call it home. You have a job? Not that I'm aware of. All right, you convinced me. But you said it's cold. Do you think I'll need a coat? Oh, don't worry yourself. How cold could it be? So anyways, that's the spirit. That's what my parents came here to this country, and myself and my sister were born here after they arrived. But that's not the story for every sort of immigrant family. Some people only get a chance to come after they've already had kids. And so what happens is that usually one parent leaves, and then after they get established and whatnot, they'll send for the other parents, send for the other children. These are the children that we're talking about at home again. Kids who come from their country of origin to their host country at a very, very young age. Those are the kids we're looking at. We're not making an argument about people who come as adults fully formed and engage in criminal activities. I don't think there's an argument to be made for that. What we're talking about is the kids who fall through these bureaucratic cracks. So for one reason or another, they do not have citizenship. So even though they were raised here from sometimes infancy, they get sent back after brushes with the law. They get sent back to their country of origin. So in 2005, we went down, interviewed over 40 deportees. And some of those stories stayed with us so much that we created a fictional piece based on them. One of the first deportees that we met was a guy named Patrick. And Patrick was almost like a mirror image of me, but he was like in the early 40s. But Patrick said he wasn't afraid of anything that you could do to a human body because he'd already been stabbed, shot, burnt, chopped, shot again, and he'd almost been beaten to death. So he said he didn't fear at all what anybody could do to him. So through the interview, we got to know him, and I mean, he grew up at the same town I did. I grew up in Scarborough, and all his references were Canadian. He'd tell us about all the music he loved, Maestro Fresh West, Let Your Backbone Slide. He'd talk about the Eaton Center, all this stuff. All his references were Canadian. And so the question we put to him, well, what was home? Home, of course, was Toronto. That was his home. He completely rejected everything about his new environment, rejected everything about Jamaica. He'd been there for 10 years. And so to the point where he was a drug addict. His job was to get so wasted, get so high, that he would blot out his reality. And that it was going to be the rest of his life, because he continually was going through rehab and getting himself kicked out because he was an unrepentant drug addict. So the idea of home can be frozen in time. And his home is a frozen place in time because it was back there. But the thing is he'll never return to that. You can draw a parallel to a lot of immigrants who come here, and their home, they're thinking about their home as being back home. But in my parents' case, that's like Jamaica back in the 60s. And they'll never go back to Jamaica back in the 60s because it's different now. Like everybody's home. Everybody deals on nostalgia. We had a speaker earlier talking about nostalgia and homesickness. The idea of homesickness for a deportee is that's their daily life. That's their daily life. And so the idea of being able to move on is incredibly hard, especially in places like Jamaica. When you come down, that becomes your name. You're no longer Sudz or David or whatever. You're a deported boy. That's who you are. Because the whole thing is deportees are blamed for a couple of things, big things. Bringing shame upon their host country and also elevating the crime levels, fairly or unfairly. So that's what you face. When you're a deportee, it's also incredibly hard to get a job. When you try to get a job, people say, no deportees. There may be even signs in the shop saying, no deportees. That's how it is. And so this is the life that we're consigning a lot of people to. And the idea is that the question is what kind of society do we want to have? I mean, the question is, maybe you're asking me, well, why should I care? These guys messed up, But the question is, if two people commit a crime, person A, born in Canada, person B, their cousin, not born in Canada, same crime, and again, it can be a lesser crime or a minor crime. One person can get a slap on the wrist and probation. The other person will spend the rest of their life paying for that crime. Living a marginal existence with no hope or future. To extrapolate on that point, when you go down and you're sent down as a deportee, not just to Jamaica, but to any country, you're sent down with what's called a travel document. You don't have a passport. You remember seeing those kids with like little placard or whatever? It's exactly the same thing, but it's called a travel document, and all that does is get you into your country of origin. What happens after that is that you may get fingerprinted, you're sent on your way, but you have no identification. In order to build a life, you need to have a bank account. You need to have some form of ID. Trying to get a driver's license, all those kind of things. All the things that we sort of take for granted, to try to get that as a deportee, that's almost impossible. And so, to get a credit rating, all that kind of stuff, that's another place. That's not going to happen. So what happens is that people who are raised here, again, sometimes from infancy, getting sent back, being treated differently under the law, and then being consigned to a fate that is, I don't want to say a living death, but it's just sort of a sleepwalking almost. And so we talked to a lot of deportees, and one of the other ones that we talked to, another guy, his name was Derek. Derek was great. He was a dancer. He was a family man. He had 2 daughters, raised in a 2-parent home. Everything was good. This guy was working. It was awesome. However, one day he made a big mistake. A friend said, "Let's go and party," and then obviously there were some drugs there, and that was it. He became a drug addict instantly. He didn't know how immediate it would be, and he was hooked. That was his job. After that, lost everything. And then family, wife, everything, job, and set down. And then now, I'm happy to say, is that he's beginning to build the steps, build the steps to building a life. He's found some faith in the ministry, and he's found a place in the ministry. And so now he's building a life down in Jamaica. But one of the things that he told us was his claim to fame was he was a model. He was a sunshine boy. Now, I don't know if you, for those of you not around here or didn't grow up around here, Sunshine Boy is kind of like the page 3 boy, kind of like, a model, beefcake, whatever. But he said, go back and find that photograph, and that would prove that I was there. That would prove that I was there. And that sort of stayed with us. One of the other things that stayed with us was I had to go get some money, so I had to go to the ATM. And so went to the ATM, and I saw this guy, and he had a child on his hip. So I passed him by, and then I was like, I stopped. I turned around, and I saw, wow, that child looks like he has special needs. And so I was drawn to him, so I said, "Hi, are you a deportee?" Usually, when somebody asks that question, they'll get into some verbal abuse, and you're shaming us, and whatever. However, he's just sort of trusted me, and he said, "Yes, I am." And so he related the story of his life to us. And he was 5 years old when he went to Brooklyn, raised there, and same story, mixed up with the law, bad choices, deportation. When he came down, he met a woman and was beginning to build a life with her. He was going to get married. They had a little place, a little apartment, and she got pregnant. When she gave birth, the child was severely autistic. That wasn't, the mom was not into that. She's actually went to the States, and leaving him with the baby, with a severely autistic child. I have friends here, I have neighbors here who have autistic children, and even with all the support that we have, it's really, really hard. I could not imagine what it was like to be on the streets of Kingston, living on the streets with a 4-year-old autistic child. This stayed with us so much that we based 2 stories in the film on Scott and his son Keith. How I'd like to sort of think about this situation in terms of deportation is it's kind of a lot of gardening analogies that we're talking about today. But I consider it think about your lawn. Look at your lawn, you got some weeds. And so sometimes you go and you spend the afternoon digging, dig up the weed, put some dirt in, maybe put some bleach in, done. You think you're done, and you sort of de-weeded or deported all your weeds. And so After that, you come back a couple weeks later, and what do you got? More weeds. And so the weeds that you thought you got rid of have just come up again. The idea, though, is that we need to look systemically. We need to look at the systems that we're talking about. We need to look at the immigration system, the criminal justice system. We need to look at citizenship and immigration. The idea that you've got a subset within a larger set of immigrants who do not get citizenship for their children, we need to look at that. The question is why? Parents need to get citizenship for their children, because if you don't, you're exposing them to great risk for your entire family. If there is impediments or barriers, why, we need to talk about that. We need to have that dialogue, and that's one of the reasons why we made this film. Are there barriers to getting citizenship? We need to talk about that. So looking at all these things systemically, one asks the question, okay, there are certain populations that are exposed to greater police interaction. In the case of young black men, that's what we read about in the newspaper. We need, again, to talk about that, because over and over and over again, you're reading in the newspaper. Why is this happening? So we need to look at this system, how it interacts with the immigration system, the education system, and looking at all the points of intersection and seeing if there's any leverage points where we can make little changes that would make big effects. Because the thing is that once you take these weeds out, your quote weeds out of your garden, you're still left with the underlying root system, the soil, the drainage, all this stuff. There may be a big, large tree there sucking up all the water, all those things. And again, I'm getting back to this gardening analogy, but we have to go back to the root causes. If we're only sort of deporting the symptoms of these problems, our problems never get fixed. And that's why we want to have this debate. Thank you.